So enough OP05 cards have been revealed now that I think I can get a pretty good feel for the 6 new leaders and their support options, since all the SRs in the set have also been revealed. So let's rank each leader by how strong I think they'll be in the OP05 meta.
Card D Kaizoku.
Here's how our tiers are broken down. We have meta contenders. These are decks that I think can compete with the top of the current meta. Competitive are decks that I think can hold their own against the top meta decks but are either hard to pilot or not as consistent. Fringe are decks that are playable but either have bad matchup spreads or are missing just a little bit more support to finally be good. Cope are decks that people will get mad at you for placing in Cope because they're bad decks that my commenters will keep asking me to make deck breakdowns for. First is Belo Betty. She's a dual color red-yellow leader with 5k power and 4 starting life. Her leader ability lets you buff 3 revolutionary army or trigger characters by 3k for the price of 1 discard. It's painfully obvious that Belo Betty will be good. You just have to look at every red card in the set to see this. You have a cheap searcher, a 2-cost blocker with 1k counter. We have a 3-cost that can attack for 7k power. We have a card that cheats out other characters from hand. We have triggers that give us free bodies. We have power down effects. We have a plethora of KO effects that come with bodies. And on top of all of that, we have a leader ability that can buff every single one of these cards afterwards. Belo Betty seems like she'll do all the things I liked doing in mid-range Zoro, but with even more utility. With how much support is being printed for her already, and how obvious the synergies are here, she'll definitely be a meta contender for sure. Next up is Sakazuki. He's a dual color blue and black leader with 5k power and 4 starting life. His leader ability lets you cycle 1 card for free every turn. He also gives a character -1 cost when attacking. So it seems like Sakazuki is a pure utility leader. That means we have to assess him based on if the color combination of blue and black is good. We know Rebecca does pretty well in OP04 and she has the same color combination, but Rebecca does not play like a normal leader since she cannot attack. Her deck relies heavily on the Dressrosa archetype too, so maybe we can't make a direct correlation here. If we look at some of the blue cards in OP05, it does give us something to be excited for. We have yet another big body that can bottom deck a card. We have a cheap navy blocker. We get a big blocker option that lets us scry 5. We get one of the most broken searchers in the game in Ulti. She can search for any card from the top 3 of your deck and she even has an attacker stat line. So what does black give us in OP05? Not much. Black seems to be more geared towards the Celestial Dragons archetype and more Dressrosa support. But if we look at past cards, we have a Navy Searcher. We have blockers immune to KO, strong bottom deck events, and strong late game card options that help you control the board. So while there's no glaring synergy with the leader and any cards in the game, Sakazuki does feel like he would make a decent good stuff deck that just runs all the good cards between black and blue. So I'll put him in competitive for now. He'll see play, but he probably won't be like oppressive like Whitebeard is. Next up is Enel. He's a monocolor yellow leader with 5k power and 4 starting life. His leader ability lets you have 1 layer of super armor when you hit 0 life for the price of 1 card in hand. This video is being uploaded before there's any Q&A to clear up any rulings, but if I go by the translation on this image, there are a couple of nuances to be aware of. 1, you have to hit 0 life on your opponent's turn. That means if you bring yourself to 0 life with one of your own effects on your turn, you lose access to the effect on your opponent's turn. The only way to bring it back is to bring yourself back up to 1 life. And 2, you can only do this while you have a card in hand to discard. So if you hit 0 life with no cards in hand, you cannot gain 1 life back. Again, this could be incorrect and we'll have to wait to see what the OP05 Q&A will say. But from my interpretation of the wording, this is how I think the leader ability works. So with that in mind, does this make Enel good? Well, when you're at 1 life, you can always take 1 hit, essentially making the effect like cycling a card, with the added benefit of being able to trigger whatever that card you drew is. Banish does negate this benefit though. It's also like a free chump blocker as you can decide to counter smaller hits and tank the biggest one. When I say it that way, the leader ability does sound pretty great. Let's look at the card pool though. Let's look at the card pool in OP05 though. We get a Sky Island Searcher with a trigger. We get a stage card that lets you search for a Sky Island card for free every turn, fueling the cost of our leader ability. We have a cheap blocker option. We have 2 searchable 2k counters. We even have a yellow Radical Beam. The star of the deck may be character Enel though. He's a 7k rush attacker for 7 Dawn. He's also one of the stickiest cards in the game, being able to evade even being bottom decked once per turn. He has great synergy with your leader ability as well, as the life that you use to revive Enel can be replenished by your leader ability when you're at 1 life. I do think that this Enel deck will play like an aggro yellow deck, since this added protection lets us survive an extra turn to finish somebody off the next turn, which is something that red decks currently are really strong at doing with all the event counters they run. Either way, I think Enel will also be pretty strong, but could use a few more cards that can utilize his leader ability a lot better. I'll have to put him in Fringe for now, but with a very positive outlook depending on future support in OP06. Next is Sabo. Sabo is a dual color red-black leader with 5k power and 4 starting life. His leader ability lets you prevent your 5k or higher characters from being KO'd once by giving them minus 1k power while you have 1 Dawn attached. This one's a little harder to assess. I think the go-to playstyle of the deck will be an aggressive one. Being able to play rush characters like starter deck Luffy and making them harder to kill seems to be what utilizes his leader ability the best. His leader ability does work on huge 10k bodies as well, but I feel like those characters usually aren't getting KO'd anyway, so I feel like that isn't the way to go. That being said, he may have a hard time in the meta. Pretty much any blue deck will have access to bottom decking effects, which nullify any benefit Sabo gets with his leader ability. Red Purple Law also has access to a bottom decking effect via his leader ability, like every turn. This makes Sabo's matchup spread very dependent on whether the opponent is playing blue or Red Purple Law or not, which doesn't scream meta contender to me. In terms of support in OP05, most of the Revolutionary Army cards seem more geared towards Belo Betty, so Sabo may just be another good stuff deck like Sakazuki. It is pretty scary to think that 5-cost Marco can have an additional layer of protection on top of being able to revive. He even loses the minus 1k debuff after reviving once too. But being an aggro deck at 4 life means you just lose the life race against every other monocolor aggro deck, so I'll have to put him in Fringe for now. You know what, I'm moving Enel up to competitive actually. When I compare Enel to Sabo, it feels like they shouldn't be in the same tier. I don't think Enel is perfect just yet and still needs one more set of support, but he does have a lot of tools available right out of the box. There's no way that I would consider him the same level as Sabo, so yep. Moving him up to competitive for now. That feels right. Next is Luffy. Luffy is a monocolor purple leader with 5k power and 5 starting life. His leader ability lets you ramp 1 active Dawn when you have 0 or 3 or more Dawn, for the price of 1 life card to hand. The fact that the life card goes to hand is what saves this leader ability. It's essentially ramp 1 Dawn and draw 1 card that you can activate whenever. Well, as long as you have life to spare, that is. He's essentially a turbo ramp leader that can get you to 10 Dawn by your 4th turn, whether you're going 1st or 2nd. The problem with ramp strategies currently is that you have to depend on characters, events, and triggers to get you that additional Dawn. Having this effect baked into your leader ability makes ramping a consistent strategy. This also frees up slots in your deck for more useful cards. Once you reach 10 Dawn, all your ramp cards become pretty much useless. The new purple Straw Hat and OP05 are perfect cards to fill in these holes. They're all playable as just stat sticks on their own, but they gain additional effects when you have 8 or more Dawn. This flexibility is just what the ramp archetype needs. Purple also suffered from not having great cards to ramp into. 9-cost Kaido was the best option, but he can't carry a game on his own. That's why the red-purple ramp decks from starter deck 10 preferred red's late game cards as ramp targets. Purple just needs something on par with 9-cost Whitebeard or 10-cost Luffy. It looks like OP05 gives that to us in the form of Gear 5 Luffy. He's a bomb that gives you an extra turn after at the price of bottom decking your entire board. If you have the life to spare, you can ramp and swing with leader for 6k and then 9k the turn after. You can think of it like this instead of an extra turn. He's a 12k body with rush that draws you a card and lets you restand your leader. We're already starting to see the rise of purple from the release of starter deck 10, and those cards are generic enough to fit into any purple deck. So with that in mind, I'll have to put Luffy in meta contender as well. I think he really has a shot at being a top tier deck, and I'm glad that purple finally gets to be good. Lastly, we have Donquixote Rosinante. He's a dual color green-blue leader with 5k power and 4 starting life. He's the first leader with blocker. He untaps himself at the end of your turn when you have 6 or less cards in hand too, so you will have access to this blocker effect when you're low in cards in hand. Well, 6 isn't too low, but you get what I mean. He essentially can turn any character trait into a leader hit once a turn. This is good at keeping your board strong and even getting you a card in hand from life. But the fact that he has 4 starting life makes this effect usable only so many times before it becomes unsafe to do so. There's no real synergy with any cards available, so he may just be another good stuff leader in green and blue. The only cool interaction I've noticed so far is with OP05, Baby 5. She's a Donquixote Pirates version of Starter Deck Bonnie. You can basically protect Baby 5 from being attacked for free by an opponent's searcher using your leader's blocker ability, or even block a leader hit and counter for 1 to 2k to keep Baby 5 alive. This lets you get an additional turn or two of searching in the early game. We also get access to the broken ulti searcher since we're blue. Other than that, I think the deck will play like a mid-range deck. The blocker effect won't be too useful if you're playing like a removal heavy Mihawk deck, since Mihawk doesn't really need a blocker to stay alive anyway. Maybe Rosinante will be the deck where the Donquixote Pirates cards will shine, since the film cards seem to fit Green Purple Doflamingo more at the moment. But with all that being said, being able to direct attacks to your leader while you only have a 5k stat line and 4 life doesn't seem like that great of a leader ability. Green and blue don't really have too much inherent synergy with each other in the first place, so I'm gonna have to place them in the cope tier. So that sums up my thoughts on the new OP05 leaders. Again, I want to reiterate that the full set hasn't been spoiled yet by the recording of this video. I just wanted to get this out early for the views. If any of the remaining cards that get revealed totally change up some of the placements of these leaders, you can definitely expect me to make an updated tier list video to farm even more views. I myself am personally excited for Belo Betty. She looks like she'll play like mid-range Zoro, which is one of my most favorite decks, and her chest is almost as big as Zoro's. It'll be great to play with Straw Hat characters again outside of a Red-Green Law deck too, with Luffy. OP05 is looking to be one of the best sets since the launch of the game, so I'm excited for that. Anyway, thanks for the tier list views and the money. I'll smell you later. Okay, bye.
Car D Kaizoku.